Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to be part of this important gathering. Thank you very much for being here today. When I immigrated to the United States of America from my country of birth, Syria, another Arab country that today is undergoing a turbulent political earthquake, never did I imagine that one day I would stand outside the United Nations to oppose its perverted conference to defend against its attempt to single out Israel, a country that I was taught to hate. Never did I think I would participate in defending good against immorality and decadence here in the West. But here I am today, proud to stand for light in the midst of darkness. This darkness brought about by the multiple Muslim countries and their international enablers who have dishonored the initial objective of the United Nations only to vilify and eventually to destroy Israel, the one and the only free democratic country in the entire Middle East. For the last 1400 years since its inception, Islamic ideology has attempted to deprive the Jews of their three most cherished possessions: their Bible, their lives, and their land of Israel. During my school years, I heard my teachers, family members, neighbors, and the media all bombarding us daily in every available venue throughout the Arab world. We, as small kids and young adults, were indoctrinated to share the vitriolic anti-Semitic hatred, to despise and denigrate Jews. God condemned the Jews because they falsified the Torah. How did I know it? That's what I was taught. Since Jews forged the Bible, they were despised and depicted as pigs and apes. How did I know it? That's what I was taught. Jews killed our prophets and were the enemies of Allah. How did I know it? That's what I was taught. Therefore, the Jews represent an existential danger to all humanity, and so their annihilation was and would be a legitimate service to God and mankind. How did I know it? That's what I was taught. Yes, killing Jews was always presented to me and my classmates as a religious obligation. We absorbed this evil propaganda with our food and water, with our school books, each and every day. When it is planted in the mind of a child, tragically, this hatred generates dangerous actions and even death. And so, Durban 3 is the end product of exactly this lasting hatred. Let's be honest. Durban 3 harbors deep anti-Semitic sentiments, the same sentiments with which my mind was poisoned, sentiments that are still taught to hundreds of millions of Arab kids throughout the Middle East. I believe that any nation that grants equal opportunity to every citizen, regardless of race, religion, political affiliation, or gender, thereby establishes its moral legitimacy. According to this principle, Israel stands alone in the Middle East region as a nation with moral legitimacy. For it grants alone in the middle, for it grants all citizens equal rights for men and women alike, freedom of religion and freedom of speech and the press. Not a single Arab or Muslim country in the surrounding region does the same, nor do any of those Arab and Muslim nations allow their citizens personal freedom or the right to maintain and express opposing points of view. These essential qualities of life provide oxygen for the human soul. They are the kind of basic nourishment that is desperately missing in all of Israel's Muslim neighbors. Let me ask, since every human being deserves to live in dignity, why has an enormous and balanced portion of global aid gone mostly to Palestinians, while millions of underprivileged people all over the world suffer genuine life-threatening deprivation? Without doubt, this trend encourages hatred and violence against the Jewish people in Israel and everywhere else, and that's exactly its point. Hence, as a woman of an Arab and Islamic background with a unique perspective, I join you all today to highlight the hypocrisy of the United Nations. I challenge the United Nations for neglecting its fundamental mission. They do it under pressure from totalitarian Muslim regime who put their full faith and credit of their oil wealth behind this anti-Israel campaign. I am here to demand that the United Nations return to its objectives to apply international law, justice, and fairness equally to all nations, regardless of their size, economic conditions, or global influence. While the United Nations obsessively attacks Israel, it has merely revealed its own abysmal human rights record. It is neglect of Muslim women's rights, ignoring freedom of faith and conscience, for turning a blind eye on the fate of Muslim apostates sentenced to death, for neglecting to address the brutal treatment of Christians and other citizens of Islamic nations, or for ignoring the rights of non-Muslim foreigners living or working in Muslim countries. A Palestinian women organization reported that Muslim men perpetrate some 40 honor killings annually in the West Bank alone, not including the vast majority of honor killing and abuse of women which go unreported. Since Islamic society maintains secrecy in keeping with the popular belief that those cursed with a sin should hide it. Where is the United Nations Human Rights Commission outcry over the Muslim world's honor-killing epidemic? Has the United Nations adopted an Islamic philosophy hiding a suicidal sin to protect Muslim honor? Where is the United Nations condemnation of Sharia law that forgives abusive men whose wives are assumed sinful? What has the United Nations done to stop and forbid this appalling trend? Mr. Ban Ki-moon, please note that we enlightened and liberated Muslims take notice, and we are enraged. Just as with Israel, the United Nations marginalizes us, enlightened and liberated Muslims, and treats us as pariahs. Elite government leaders, willfully blind Western media, arrogant Middle East studies academics, and foolish United Nations representatives follow suit. All these apparently progressive, free-thinking leaders have given their full support to Islamic totalitarian countries and rally behind their dreadful objectives at the United Nations. I receive countless letters from Arab readers throughout the Middle East, expressing their desperate desire to live as free people with the same human rights we enjoy in the West, and especially freedom from Sharia. One young Arab woman, a student, wrote to me only last month, "They deprive us of any right to think and remind us each time how we will burn in hell. They terrorize us, and they do the same with the children. I would like that to stop. I try very hard to change things. I created a little group against sexism, and I hope to be able to defend Arab women one day." Tell me, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who will defend this young student and her small group fighting Arab sexism and the atrocities committed against Arab women? Concerning Islamic and Arab violence, the United Nations remains tragically blind and silent. The United Nations repeats its denunciation of Israel, the only Middle East nation that grants all citizens the basic human right this young Arab woman wishes to have for her people. Here is an important information to expose the charade of Durban III conference. According to recent face-to-face surveys by prominent international pollsters, more Palestinians in East Jerusalem would prefer to be citizens of Israel than citizens of a new Palestinian state. And 40% would probably or definitely move to avoid Palestinian rule. This alone demonstrates the hypocrisy of the United Nations and its Durban III Forum. To add salt to wound, the United Nations has degenerated into the puppet of Arab and Islamic forces, operating freely in its own hallways and offices. It has evolved into a tool of the Organization of Islamic Conference, the 56 Islamic nations seeking through the United Nations to impose international blasphemy laws supposedly labeled defamation of religion. We understand this would criminalize anyone criticizing Islam. To be specific, the United Nations aims to suppress free speech globally, and especially the freedom to oppose many harsh tenets of Islam's Sharia law. Without a doubt, this plan to criminalize a genuine and necessary discourse on Islam is seditious and most dangerous. But in spite of their attempt to silence voices of dissent, let's be frank, from Islamic point of view, the so-called Arab-Palestinian-Israeli conflict is merely an Islamic jihad, specifically targeting Jewish infidels, cultivated by sacred texts which date to the time of Muhammad. Even if the alleged Arab-Palestinian crisis were solved, jihadists will continue fulfilling their Islamic duty to subdue the entire world under Islam and Sharia. So now, I am here to stand with all of those who are in the fight to preserve our freedom. I call on all nations and people to boycott the United Nations Durban III Conference against racial discrimination. Those who love liberty and life will strengthen their ties and warm relations with Israel and stand with her. Israel will continue to shine its light among all nations. Thank you.